Hello, I'm Jeannie Caldwell, and welcome to In His Presence Classic episode. Well, we all know that it takes money to live in today's world, and today we bring back Scott and Bethany Palmer to talk about money and marriage. It's a hot topic in today's economy, and the Palmers share some practical advice in their book, Sense and Sensibility. I hope you'll enjoy taking a look back at this program. Welcome, Scott, and welcome, Bethany.
It's great.
It's so good to have you here. I've really enjoyed your book,
Thank
and we
you.
want to talk about that today, because I know there are a lot of people that would be so blessed and so helped by Sense and Sensibility. How couples can agree about money. Discover your money personality type. So I tell you what, that is a wonderful title for this. So what was the premise of this book?
Well, what we found, Bethany and I have had the opportunity to serve thousands of couples with our ministry, Envoy Financial, over the past 15 years. And what we found is we had couples coming into our offices and struggling with so many different financial issues. We started asking ourselves, why isn't this getting better? I mean, with all the information that we have, with all of the resources that we have available, just go to your Christian bookstore or one of the huge bookstores, Barnes & Noble or something like that, and you'll see all of the resources that we have available talking about having the perfect budget, talking about getting out of debt, talking about the perfect way to invest your money. And what we found out, these things weren't working. So what's happening? What's wrong? What is the part of the puzzle that we're missing? And what we found was couples really don't agree about money in most relationships. And so we needed to give a tool that would allow couples to step back and say, okay, the budget is important, and the finances are important, and our investments are important, but let's step back, work on getting on the same page about money, and how do we communicate about those issues in a way where we both can create a win-win situation and move this relationship forward.
Yeah.
And then what we did is we developed a money personality assessment. And so people can discover what their own money personality is, and then what their spouse's money personality is, and then that way understand each other and realizing their strengths and weaknesses for all money personalities. But it's a fun way for people to understand themselves and then their spouse as well. And the 6 money personalities are a saver, a spender, a risk taker, security seeker, somebody we call a debtor, and then a flyer. And now a flyer is the person that flying blind. They don't know where their money is, how much money they have, bills come in, they pay them anyway, those kind of things. We probably all know somebody who's a flyer. But everybody has a primary money personality and then a secondary money personality. And so with those money personalities, you discover what your primary one is, what your secondary one is, and then that way you can work through conflict. Like, for example, for Scott and myself, we're both primary spenders. So our natural propensity is to spend, and we have a lot of stories in Sense and Sensibility, our own stories. We've gotten into some trouble. But where we're opposite is in our secondary money personality. I'm secondary risk taker, and Scott is secondary security seeker. So like if I see an investment opportunity or something, I'm going to want to jump right in there and go for it. And Scott probably is going to be, well, he is much more reserved. So he's learned if I see an opportunity or something, I'll talk about it. The first thing he will do is he won't go, oh, well, we can't do that. Let's talk about it, and he won't squelch my enthusiasm right away, and we can work through it. So it's just been a great tool for ourselves and then for couples we work with.
Yeah. Now that secondary personality where money's concerned, now where does that come in?
Well, it's one of those 6 that I outlined. So it's one of those 6. So it's what your first thought is of what you are, and then you also have what you are second. And the second is where you can get into conflict too. So like I said, we're both primary spenders, so we don't have problems there, but it's that secondary, what your secondary is where you have conflict. Yeah, it's really, but the thing that's so neat about the whole process is that it's easy to figure out. You know, you can read the descriptions in Sense and Sensibility, and what your first impression is of yourself is usually right. So you don't have to take all these long, extensive tests or anything to figure it out.
Right.
It's what your natural, what your thought is at first.
What you actually know. So why, is that why you wrote this book?
We did. We wanted to put people in a position not to only understand themselves, but also to understand their spouse. because what we talk about in this book is we need to learn how to give space and grace again. We've become such a society of, well, I deserve this, or this is how I am, you understand me, and we kind of forget, hey, I need to understand the other person. I need to put myself in a position where maybe I can even encourage this person.
Right.
And we can work together to get to common ground. So the thought process behind the book was, let's give couples the opportunity to move forward on a financial basis together and take away all the fighting and take away all the stuff that happens in a relationship, the resentment that builds over the years. Half of all divorces in America are due to financial issues. And so if we can start taking that back in our relationships and start taking back our finances, I mean, not only does it bless the relationship, but it can save that relationship. It can save that family. And so it's very important that we understand how to work together better with this issue because it's so huge.
Isn't that amazing? And you were saying so many divorces, and that's Christians as well as non-Christians.
Exactly, it's no different. And if, like Scott said, if we can learn how to communicate about this area, you know, God talks about finances more than 2,300 times in the Bible. It's an important topic, and He knows it is. So that's why He addresses it so many times in the Bible. But for some reason, we take the financial side of things and we want to put that over here and not bring it into our relationship, understand each other, and help our relationship grow and get stronger through the topic of finances.
Right. So what are some of the common ways that couples disagree about money?
Well, I think that probably the most obvious is the spender-saver. If you've got one person in the relationship that's like myself and they just have a natural propensity after the bills are paid, hey, let's go spend this.
You get $100, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, our obligations have been met. Let's go have some fun this weekend. That's the way a spender thinks. A saver would say, you know, we've got this $100. Let's save that. Let's put that in our IRA, or let's put that in the bank for an emergency fund or something like that. And so that's where we see the majority of conflict, because what can happen is resentment builds because, well, the spender is just a spendthrift, and that person just spends their money and doesn't care. Or the saver is a hoarder, and he's just hoarding all the money for himself, and we don't get to have any fun with what we've made or what we have. So it really comes to an issue of balance in those areas.
And you know what also is interesting is that, like I think of my parents, for example, and they're both savers, but they're savers to different degrees and on different things. So they still have conflict. We happen to be, our primary is spender, and we don't have a lot of conflict when it comes to our first natural propensity, that's for sure. But they're both savers, but to different degrees and on different things. So they have a lot of conflict when it comes to money.
Isn't
so
that amazing?
it's not that you have to have opposite money personalities to have conflict. You can have the same money personality and still have some conflict.
Well, what is the money personality that you're talking about that are in people?
Well, there's a number of reasons why we got to our money personality. In the second part of Sense and Sensibility, we have 5 chapters that address it. Some of the reasons are the way we were raised. I mean, you either mimic how you were raised or the way that your parents, or you rebel against it.
That's true.
Isn't that true?
Yeah, it is.
I think of myself and some of the weird things that I do when it comes to money, and some of those are rebelling against what my parents did. Maybe past experiences. If you went into an investment, for example, and lost a lot of money, that's going to have some effect on how you make a future money decision.
Another one is just the way we're wired. I mean, God creates us all so differently. And so some of the reasons that we do the things we are is just because that's the way that God has made us. Now, to anybody out there that's thinking, oh, well, God made me a spender, I need to go shopping today, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that God's given us the opportunity to be the way we are, and He's created us that way. So really the way that we're hardwired also dictates our money personalities.
That's interesting. Well, what are the different money personalities that you describe in this book? There are quite a few of them, and they're so interesting.
Well, to really analyze and understand what your money personality is through being a saver or a spender, a risk taker or security seeker, a debtor or a flyer, there's importance to understand, again, that there's strengths and weaknesses to both. But really, you can identify your money personality rather quickly when you read Sense and Sensibility. you'll know what your primary one is and your secondary one is pretty quickly. It's also kind of fun on our website. You can go and take one online as well. So it really complements Sense and Sensibility and helps you realize what yours is, what your spouse is, and then how to work through some of those differences.
One of the things we tell couples is there's no right and there's no wrong.
Yep.
Right.
Because I'm a saver and you're a spender, it doesn't mean I'm right and that you're wrong.
That's right.
And that's where that space and grace comes back to.
Yeah.
As far as being able to have couples and put them in a position where we're both right, and we just need to learn how to give a little bit more.
Right.
Also, too, we have developed 2 communication systems that really help people work through money issues. The first one is called a powwow. Do you want to talk about
Sure.
that?
The powwow is a way to organize talking about your money. You might have a relationship where maybe you've got a stay-home mom, and she does all the bills and she cuts all the checks and she just occasionally lets her husband know, hey, this is how much money we have in the account. Or it might be vice versa. You might have a CPA and he does all the books for the family, and the wife doesn't have any clue what's out there. So what this powwow does is it gives couples the opportunity to sit down and have some organization. Okay, we need to talk about these topics. We need to get rid of all the distractions. If you've got we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and every once in a while we need to put them in the playroom so that we can get something done. And that's the kind of environment that you want to set. And then really sit down and just learn how to communicate about understanding where the finances are going, get on the same page about that, but really take the time to talk.
And then also, we talk when we talk about the powwow about the lost art of dreaming and thinking about where God's going to call you in the future and how your money plays a role in that. And you know, when you first get married, you think, oh, we're going to do this, and God's going to take us here, and you're all excited, and that gets lost just with the everyday humdrum of life. And so, what the powwow does is starts to bring that back into your relationship, the fun and the thinking about where God's going to take you in the future. And that's really, really a fun part of working through your money issues together. And then now, we know we all have conflict, so we have developed a communication system for conflict as well.
That one we call meeting at the fence. And basically what it is a conflict resolution system when it comes to money. So when there's a conflict, what you can do is you can say, instead of getting all mad and having this huge fight, you can say, you know what, I think we have an issue here, and I think we need to meet at the fence. And then kind of some of the general rules around meeting at the fence is that you meet within 24 hours. If it happens in the morning, don't let the sun go down on that anger. And so let's talk about our money situation within the first 24 hours. And it's a communication system so that one person doesn't do all the talking, which means you both get to talk. You both get to offer suggestions about how this situation can be resolved. And then you both make that resolution together. And it's really worked well for the couples that we've counseled, to give them these communication systems. Just kind of let them take a step back and say, okay, we've got a system here. Let's put that into place and make that work for us.
Oh, that sounds excellent. Well, let's take a short break, and when we come back, we will talk about the 5 hot buttons Scott and Bethany talk about in their book, Sense and Sensibility. We'll be right back. All I could think to say was, get it out of the street. In fact, that was the last thing I remember saying. The next thing I remember was being put into an ambulance on a stretcher. I had absolutely no fear, for I felt God's presence. The doctors wanted to put 3 rods in my back to support my vertebrae column, but I chose not to have the surgery. I knew in my heart that God would supernaturally take care of me.
Learning to Trust God's Faithfulness is a book about Jeannie Caldwell's real-life encounters with God. She shares them with you in the hope that your faith and trust in a loving Heavenly Father will increase. To order the book, Learning to Trust God's Faithfulness, call 800-264-2525 or visit our website at vtntv.com.
We want to pick up where we left off with the 5 buttons that you detail in this book. Which one of you want to talk about it, if you maybe want to share it?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, what we did was when we went through this book, you know, it's mostly a communication book. How do we communicate about money? But we thought to ourselves, you know, we need to leave people with probably the 5 hot buttons that they need to start working through. One of those is budgeting, and I'll take a couple, and then Bethany will take a couple. But the first one I like to talk about is budgeting. Why don't budgets work? Because for most people, 80% of the population, they start off with this great budget, and after 2 or 3 months, it just kind of goes away.
It's like working out.
It is, it is. A lot of people start training for a marathon, but they don't run it.
You know, we're in January, you got your New Year's resolution,
That's
let's
right.
do it, but then we stop doing it.
So what we found was that the problem with budgeting is that sometimes it's way too strict.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's one of the partners, one of the spouses that's driving that budget. And the other one's just kind of there along because, well, that's just something she wanted to do or that's just something he wanted to do. And so it's really important, if you want to make a budget work, to make sure that you're on common ground about that budget, that you understand about that budget, and that you're moving forward together about that budget. And the powwows will really help you keep that budget on track. So budgeting is very important to talk about.
Budgeting, okay.
Another one is, let's talk about investing.
Okay.
And what that means is, you know, some people will say real estate's the best place to be. Some people will say, well, you have to have a mutual fund. Some people will say bonds. Some people say stock. And although we don't go into specifics, hey, this is the one that you should have, what we talk about is, how do you talk about those things? How do you talk about how your past experiences might dictate how you need to talk about those things? And so it's very important just to start working your way through those issues.
And then we have one that we call future planning. Now that involves things like planning for college education for your kids. And it's so interesting because a lot of times couples, when they have gone to school, one of the spouses, their parents paid for all of it. And the other one, they had to put themselves through it. So you have that conflict, and it comes into the marriage. It's like, well, I had to pay for it. My child's going to too. And you get honed in on what you think is right, and don't learn how to talk about it. Another one that's in future planning is retirement planning. Planning and thinking about where God's going to call you in that stage of ministry. You know, retirement's not even in the Bible, that word. So we've got to make sure that we're thinking about it as terms of being in ministry no matter what stage of life, and talking through that very, very important area. That's an area near and dear to our heart in working with so many ministries in their retirement planning. And then we also talk about the whole area of insurances. You know, long-term care insurance, life insurance. How do you talk through all of those different things? And then we save the best for last. That's our last chapter, and we talk about charitable giving and how important it is to work through that. You know, some people think that, like if you're an attorney, you think, well, if I give time to my church, then that's giving of money. So we've got all these different perspectives of what that means and interpretations of the Bible. And so we strive to give a way for couples to be able to work through that important area of charitable giving.
Charitable giving is such an interesting topic, and as we've talked to hundreds and thousands of couples about, you know, what's your take on charitable giving, and what are some of the hot buttons that you work through charitable giving? It really comes a lot from just our past experience and how we were raised. And you might find yourselves in a situation where maybe one of you was saved and then the other one became saved later. So the whole charitable giving is just totally brand new. I mean, why would you do that? Also, the issue of credit cards. Do you pay your credit card off first?
Yes.
Or do you give to your church first? I mean, how do those things balance? So we just talk about some of those issues on how to get on the same page, because then you can really get and work together on a system to maybe get out of debt and continue to give to your church. And then just watch yourself get blessed through that situation.
And I noticed you had charitable giving and tithing. And so many people, you know, I've seen a lot of folks that don't want to tithe. You know, they'll just give maybe $1 a week or $5 a week or something like that, you know, and maybe their partner is a tither, and that can cause problems.
Oh, it does.
We've seen tithing just drop so much in our churches. And it's interesting because it's dropped almost to less than 3%. The average parishioner gives less than 3% of what they make to the church. There's a problem there, and there's an issue there if our tithing has dropped that much. And so we need to figure out why that's happening.
And we believe that if couples can start talking about these 5 hot buttons, that the giving and that the dollars will be there because you've worked through it together. And the tithing and giving to our charities will go up too, because our couple, we're talking about it more. And it's an area that we want to get on the same page about, and then we work towards, and we're giving more because we're on the same page.
On the same page,
yeah. Right.
Well, what about today's generation, the 25 to 40? Do they think differently from past generations?
They do. We do. I think there's some different issues to that. First one I like to talk about is just credit card debt. I got my first credit card in the student union of University of North Dakota, way up north in Grand Forks. And I signed up for a credit card because I got a 2-pound bag of M&Ms. And that seemed like a pretty good deal to me. You know, I could sit there and fill this thing out and walk around with a 2-pound bag of M&Ms in my backpack. What I didn't understand was what I was really doing. And as I started using that credit card and becoming dependent on that credit card, I found myself home that next summer trying to explain to my dad how I had racked up $1,200 in credit card debt. I worked all summer to pay that off. But that's what the Gen Xers and the Gen Yers and so many of between 25 and 40 are facing with that. Yeah. I didn't even know what a layaway program was until my dad told me before there were credit cards, you know, you could lay something away, but you had to pay it off and then you got it. I thought, wow, I didn't even know there was a layaway program. Why would you do that? If you got a credit card, you just swipe it and go. But because we have been programmed like that, and because the media and just everything that we're bombarded with the advertisements, it's a here and now. And I don't have to wait for it. I don't have to put it on layaway because I got this little piece of plastic that I can just swipe and take it home with me and then pay it off later. And so we've lost the art of putting off gratification to save for these things. So absolutely, we're looking at a new generation of spenders, and savings going down and spending's going up. Sooner or later, that's going to catch us.
Yeah, it will.
And we need to educate our children.
Sure.
And you can see what your children's money personality is. We have our oldest son who's only 4, and we already think he's going to be a saver. And so we can help guide our children because things like cell phones and computers now are starting to be like, well, I deserve this. And we need to start educating our children of working for things and educating them about what their own money personalities are so they can watch for some of the weaknesses that might come along with those and really start to help our children too.
That's true. Well, I want the people to see Sense and Sensibility. This is what it looks like. Looks just like them, doesn't it? Except they really look better in person. But anyway, it's a wonderful book, and it's $12.99. And you can go to www.envoyfinancial.org. And you have the address on the screen, and you can either go by email or any bookstore, I would imagine, would have it. And you can get you one of these books. And I tell you what, it is an excellent book. I know my producer told me, she said, you want to have these people. She said, I read it, and she's a young married girl, and she said, and my husband and I read it, and we needed it. And so she said, I believe that everybody would enjoy this book. So I just want to encourage you to get that. So what is the promise of your book, and why should people read it? We have 5 minutes here.
This is the fun part.
That's right. I think that the promise of this book is we need to put ourselves in a position to understand why we think about money, why we save money, why we spend money, and why we approach money the way that we do. Instead of letting it become this issue in our relationships that tears us apart, let it bring us together. Let's take this whole topic back, and let's work as couples to really understand ourselves, which is important, but also very important to understand your spouse, so that we can work on a united front, so that we can start making those tithe dollars go up and giving back to our churches, start giving to our missionary and parachurch organizations, but doing it in such a way that as a couple we can grow, as a couple we can learn how to educate our kids and move them forward and help them in their future relationships, and really bring this whole subject that's hurt so many relationships, let's just take it back.
And the subtitle of Sense and Sensibility, since it's how couples can agree about money. And so many times people will say, they can? Because there's just such a thought out there that people can't, and couples can't agree about money. But we really believe that through reading Sense and Sensibility that couples can.
Well, I agree with it. And like I say, that how couples can agree about money, I think that is very much of a priority in all couples, not just those that have just gotten married and that are young, but even older. I mean, you know, older people.
My 89-year-old grandmother, Grams, she's, well, everybody needs to read this book. Even the people in my community need to read it. So, and we look at it at that, and then also couples that are just about ready to get married, if they could get on the same page about money, starting off their relationship that way, how great that will be. We have 25 questions in there that newlyweds can work through to help understand themselves, where their spouse came from or their future spouse came from when it comes to money, and work through that.
You know, it's interesting, we have 77 million people moving into retirement within the next 10 years.
Wow.
And so that changes a lot. And so
does.
couples that are moving into retirement and that are maybe just a couple years, they need this book
Yeah, they
because
do.
they're gonna have some changes in their life, especially when it comes to finances, whether they're having to go on a fixed income or maybe they start taking money out of those retirement accounts that they've been working on. And so it really is from newlyweds to, you know, been married 50 years, but we're just entering a new phase in our life.
Well, that just sounds wonderful. And once again, I appreciate the two of you coming all the way from Colorado Springs.
Yes.
And you say it's cold there.
It is.
And,
It's getting colder.
well, we're getting there. You know, last week we had a heat wave. It even got up to the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I think today it's supposed to get close to the 80s. You know,
great.
but that's unusual. We usually are in the low 70s, somewhere in there, mid 70s or something like that.
We came at the right time.
You came at the right time, yeah. But anyway, I appreciate so much the both of you coming. And I know your book will be such a blessing if you want to order it. We'll give you once more the www.financial, what is it,
It's
Envoy?
envoyfinancial.org.
All right, there it is.
ENVOY financial.org. And you can order it there and at your local bookstore.
Right. Well, we've got some wonderful bookstores here, and so I imagine they're going to be going out and trying to find it. And I don't blame you. It's a wonderful book, and I know my producer read it, and she said, I tell you what, this is a good book. My husband and I, we've just gotten married, and we got a lot to learn. We got a lot to agree on, and so I know that they will absolutely come into agreement about their money personalities. And I don't know whether one's a spender and one's a saver or where they are, but you can come into agreement when you find out about your partner and just talk about it, have a powwow, as you say.
There you go.
And find out the way your partner thinks and the way you think. And the best way you can do that is by talking. You got to communicate. And when you communicate, then you will know in the name of Jesus what to do. And I appreciate once again you coming. And I know you'll have a wonderful trip back home. You're leaving this afternoon, and I just appreciate you coming so much.
Thank you
You've
for
been a
having me.
blessing
Thank
to
you.
us and to the In His Presence audience.
Thank you.
I want you to know that I do love you, and Jesus loves you, and I want you to always remember the Word says, in His presence is fullness of joy. So rejoice and be glad. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today for In His Presence. You can write Jeannie Caldwell at Post Office Box 22007, Little Rock, Arkansas 72221, or email her at jeanniecaldwell@vtntv.com. To order a DVD of today's program, call 1-800-264-2525 and ask for the offer number on the screen. Join us next time as we meet in His Presence.